समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all.
Through the looking glass, the bright red words of the Coca-Cola logo seem to scream blasphemy. There is no Muhammad, there is no Mecca. Everywhere, jihadist, pop writer and cleric Sanaul Haq saw signs of the coming apocalypse, a war on his faith. From the bowels of the Bermuda Triangle, the devil was reaching out to snatch planes, ships and souls. The devil's rule, he warned, would see, and I quote, the truth presented as falsehood and the falsehood presented as the truth. A time was coming when, I quote again, the sky would rain and the earth yield crops, but neither would give succor to the people who would face drought. For the pious, there was only one path left to fight the devil, he wrote. The Lord has declared that if jihad is not carried out, the earth would be filled with fasad or conflict. Last week, officials in New Delhi learned that one of the men drawn to Sanaul Haq's words is now being held in a prison in Lahore. Mohammed Usman, a former resident of Sambhal in Uttar Pradesh, travelled to Pakistan, investigators say, as part of a conspiracy to build an Al-Qaeda unit meant to wage war on India. 11 years after slain jihadist leader Ayman al-Zawahiri proclaimed the founding of Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, or the Al-Qaeda branch responsible for our region, the organization has yet to conduct a single operation of significance though. Leaders like Sanaul Haq, better known by his pseudonym Asim Umar, have been killed in American drone strikes. Lieutenants he dispatched to India are in prison. And Al-Qaeda's relationship with jihadist groups which are fighting Islamabad, as the story of Usman suggests, has deprived the group of its long-standing safe havens. Is Al-Qaeda's project in the Indian subcontinent now dead? There is no simple answer. Earlier this month, a United Nations monitoring group reported that Afghanistan's Taliban regime was housing low-level Al-Qaeda operatives in various Kabul neighborhoods like Sheher-e-Naw and Wazir Akbar Khan, while also setting up safe houses for its top leadership in remote villages. Even more critically, the communal fractures that shaped the Indian jihadist movement remaining a toxic part of our present. To understand the rise of Al-Qaeda in India requires a journey through the mirror, not into fantasy, but into the millenarian frenzy that took root in the 1990s. To many jihadists, it seemed at that time that a long-awaited decisive battle with the West was dawning. The discovery of Coca-Cola's purportedly blasphemous iconography occurred in Lucknow that year, spreading worldwide through a new medium, the internet. Fringe ideas like the prophecy of an apocalyptic war involving the army of the Prophet Muhammad found a growing audience. Like other jihadists of his generation, Sanaul Haq was, by the way, likely born between 74 and 1976, though we don't know for sure. His worldview was shaped by communal violence. From 1977, communal clashes in India had escalated savagely, culminating finally in the Babri Masjid demolition in 1992. And across India in that period, small jihadist groups began to spring up. Abdul Karim Tunda, so nicknamed because he was maimed in a bomb-making accident, is alleged to have carried out multiple attacks during that period. The Students' Islamic Movement of India, or SIMI, which was banned by the Indian government in 2001, began lurching further rightwards, eventually heading down a path that would lead some of its members to form India's most lethal urban terror network, the Indian Mujahideen. Although Sanaul Haq does not mention this anywhere in his writings, he probably had some first-hand encounters with such violence. As the Prince Vandana Menon has noted, Sambhal has a history of communal violence dating back to the early 20th century. After spending a few months at the famous Darul Uloom seminary in Deoband, Sanaul Haq dropped out of his clerical education and left for Pakistan in 1995, a year perhaps not coincidentally which was marked by intense communal tension in Sambhal itself. Later he would write, I quote, "Democracy is one of the evils that has had a bad impact on the Muslim nation, replacing the system of Allah with an alternative that gives power to human beings who are merely the creation of Allah. Democracy is evil, and if you want to destroy it, you have to destroy its four essential pillars: parliament, judiciary, civil bureaucracy, and media." And the interesting thing about that is, a lot of Islamists like Simi were saying the same things during that period. For a time, Indian intelligence officials claim Sanaul Haq studied at the Jamia Ulum-e-Islamia, a Karachi seminary that has produced several jihadist leaders, including Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Mohammed Masood Azhar Alvi. In late 1990s, he briefly taught at the Darul Uloom Haqqaniya Seminary, one of the fountainheads of the global jihadist movement, which is in Akoda Khatak in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. There, he encountered the Harkatul Mujahideen group, out of which Masood Azhar would later emerge. Later, intelligence officials say he served at Harkatul Mujahideen camps in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, lecturing recruits from India. Following the events of 9/11 though, Sanaul Haq left Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and moved back to Karachi. He lived from 2004 to 2006 at the Harkatul Mujahideen's office in the Harunabad neighborhood. His turn towards Al-Qaeda began in the summer of 2007 after General Parvez Musharraf cracked down on jihadists opposing his rule. By 2013, there was some evidence that Sanaul Haq was embedded in the struggle against American forces in Afghanistan. Writing in the pro-Taliban magazine Azan that year, he declared, "There is no fasad greater than the world being ruled by man-made law instead of Allah's law. When this happens, the world is filled with fasad. Even the animals and birds start crying out. The earth stops growing its produce." Court records reveal that these linkages led Sanaul Haq to recruit from his friends and fellow students. The trial of former Sambhal resident Muhammad Asif showed that support networks for the Jaish-e-Mohammed had been set up at Asim Umar's or Sanaul Haq's instigation as early as 1999. From 2013 onwards, several Indians, including Muhammad Sharjeel Akhtar, Muhammad Rehan, Zafar Masood, Syed Anzar Shah, and Aligarh Muslim University educated engineer Arshia Haider, travelled to Pakistan for training. By late 2015, funding from supporters in the Indian diaspora, including Glasgow suicide bomber Kafil Ahmad's brother Sabil Ahmad and Karachi-based gang lord jihadist Farhatullah Ghori, allowed Sanaul Haq's network to expand even more. Why then did his effort fail? Likely, it wasn't due to just intelligence or policing. Indian authorities were largely unaware of these networks. They didn't even know that Al-Qaeda's regional chief was an Indian national until the 2015 arrest of Odisha-based cleric Abdul Rahman. Even today, parts of the story remain mostly unknown. Arshia, for example, is imprisoned in Turkey, but despite completing his sentence there, he successfully resisted deportation to India. Figures like Farhatullah Ghori, meanwhile, remain in Karachi, out of reach of Indian investigators. The key question is, if even crude cash-trap networks like Abdul Karim Tunda's were able to stage terror campaigns, leave aside better funded groups like the Indian Mujahideen, why did Al-Qaeda, with its vast transnational resources and links to Pakistani jihadist groups, fail? The answer possibly lies in shadowy shifts in Pakistani policy which have taken place after the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai. Facing international pressure and the threat of financial sanctions, Islamabad has been forced to curb its support for jihadists targeting India. The Indian Mujahideen leadership, which had sought refuge in Pakistan after many of its figures were arrested, was pushed out and forced to fight alongside Al-Qaeda's units in Iraq and Syria, where they were ultimately decimated by American, Russian, and even Iranian bombs. Few survived. Those who did, like Arshia, are in prison. There is no clear information on when Mohammed Usman was incarcerated in Lahore, but it's clear being an anti-India jihadist no longer guarantees kind treatment in Pakistani prisons. More importantly, Al-Qaeda's jihadist message never resonated with Indian Muslims in the way it did in the Middle East and Afghanistan. Sanaul Haq's calls for violence, analyst Hari Prasad notes, drew only a tiny following. For Indian Muslims, violent jihad against their homeland seemed absurd. All of this, of course, could change. Pakistan's slow descent into anarchy could once again provide safe havens for anti-India jihadists. And large-scale communal violence in India could radicalize a new generation as it did in the 1990s. Even small numbers of radicalized jihadists, as the Indian Mujahideen story teaches us, can cause significant damage. The case of Mohammed Usman and the death of Al-Qaeda's Indian dreams should remind New Delhi that developments in Pakistan have gifted it time and space. That opportunity should not be wasted by reigniting the communal fires that once gave birth to jihadism and could do so again. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.